So welcome back to ETNAtalks, the place where culture and care intersect. Today, we are traveling to Denmark to speak with a true champion for the most vulnerable voices in our healthcare system, Dr. Dorthe Nielsen. She's an associate professor at the University of Southern Denmark and a senior researcher at Odense University Hospital. But beyond her titles, she is known for her deep commitment to the unequal encounter. She has dedicated her career to studying how elderly migrants and socially vulnerable patients navigate a healthcare system that wasn't always built for them. From chronic disease management to simple power of listening, her work challenges us to move beyond standard care and toward true intercultural compassion. She is a fellow of the European Transcultural Nursing Association and the Transcultural Nursing Society, a leader who believes that every patient's story deserves to be heard. Dr. Nielsen, welcome to ETNAtalks.
Thank you so much, Juan. I've been looking forward to talk to you today. So finally we made it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is a pleasure. It is a pleasure to share with you these 20, 30 minutes. So, Dorothy, your work focuses heavily on socially vulnerable patients, often elderly migrants, as I said, who might be struggling with chronic diseases. In a busy, high technological hospital environment, these patients often become invisible, let's say. Can you walk us through what the healthcare system looks like through their eyes? And what are we missing when we just treat the disease and not the person?
Thank you, Juan, for this really, really important question because we always take that for granted, but the hospital can feel like a very fast system built for people who already knows the rules. So it's kind of everything is time, technical, and full of implicit expectations. So when to speak, what to ask, what are you allowed to disagree with, and how much are you supposed to understand without saying you don't? It's all these rules that makes it difficult when you are struggling a bit and don't a natural part of the system.
Yeah.
I do experience that for many of the socially vulnerable older migrants, for example, often living with a lot of chronic illness and diseases, that they experience the hospital is not just a place of treatment. It can kind of feel like a place where their dignity is tested. They might be in pain, they might be frightened, or they might be dependent on others, while also struggling with language, especially hearing problems or even fatigue. And if you are a person who has experiences of discrimination, war, or kind of unstable institutions, it can also awaken a deep mistrust. So
Mhm.
questions like, will they listen to me, or will I be treated fairly? Or also, I very often experience that they ask kind of, or they don't trust that we want to help them. That so questions like, will they actually harm me, also very often comes up. So I believe that when we miss, or when that we miss when we only treat the disease and when we only look at the disease, or only treat, or only are curious in the disease, then we miss the most important, and that is the person's everyday life.
Yeah.
How many how do they manage medication? How do they eat? How do they how is their mobility? Do they feel lonely? Do they have families? What are their roles, their identity, and da da da, finances and fear? And we also very often miss the meaning they give to illness, and what they believed kind of caused it. This is very much also Arthur Kleinman approaches coming up
Yeah.
now. I can hear that. But what have they hoped for, and what are they most worried about? We are not we are not trained in asking these questions, and we are not trained in the hospital to be curious here. And
Yeah.
can I come up with another last really important
Sure,
issue,
sure.
because I experience not only with migrants, but in older patients or in some patients in general, that a lot of people face challenges with language. Even the ones speaking Danish, they find language barriers within the hospital. And we simply don't understand the importance of language barriers. Because if you don't share the kind of same language as your doctor or your nurse, you are kind of depending on trusting other people.
It is. It's true.
And it's such it's such a big challenge. And one of my very good PhD students, Lisbeth Birkelund, I even think you have met her, she found in her research that patients were comparing language barriers to torture, and they also use this concept, language pain. Does it make
Wow.
sense? Yeah.
It
So
does.
we really we have to be much more focused on the importance of language and language
Language.
barriers.
Yeah, and I wrote down here in my notebook how sad that our patients may not trust us. This is like the, I don't know, like the most dehumanizing act or whatever. And also, as a person who has lived outside Spain, I lived in Edinburgh for a year. I lived in Houston for half a year, and that was one of my main fears. Like,
Yeah,
oh, please, I don't want to go to the doctor or to the
yeah,
nurse or whatever because it's not like, even though I can speak English,
yeah,
I mean, I speak whatever I speak because it's not perfect English, but I can have
yeah,
a conversation. But
exactly.
on a clinical setting, I was really, really scared because of
Yeah,
precisely what this is what you were saying
yeah.
in it. I
I
can
actually
understand.
I have a quote just about that from one of my patients, and he said, "You need to understand how it is not to be understood to understand it."
That's
Isn't it
true.
beautiful? You need to
It is.
understand how it is not to be understood to understand it.
It is very beautiful, and it
Yeah.
relates to you said about their meaning, and I
Mm,
wrote down their meaning versus our meaning.
mm,
And this is like magical. I mean, if we are able to match their
yeah,
meanings and our meanings, it's
yeah,
like the perfect, I don't know, the
yeah,
perfect solution.
yeah,
Wow. Let's move on to another
yeah,
question that I have here.
yes, yeah,
I mean, because we know that nurses often label, let's say, patients who don't follow the instructions or who don't I mean, like they know, yes, but don't understand as a compliant, or we label them as difficult patients. You have studied also the unequal encounters. Is this actually a failure of the patient, or is it a failure of our communication skills? Do we flip that script? I mean, how do we flip that script? What can
yeah.
we do to flip this?
Yeah, I also love that question. I have actually two master students right now looking into the concept of how is the concept, the difficult patient, being constructed within the healthcare sector and among nurses, actually.
Yeah,
Nurses trained to be compassionate and caring. But I'm totally convinced that it's never the failure of the patient. It's more like a mismatch between what the system expects and what the patient is actually able to understand, accept, or manage. And it's kind of, for example, when a person nods yes, it can mean so many things.
yeah,
It can mean politeness, it can be respect, it can also be fear of appearing ignorant or simply trying to end a stressful conversation. So in my research, the unequal encounters, this difficult patient is frequently a sign that we have not to, well, it's a kind of a sign that we have not built a shared understanding.
yeah,
And we use it also in the clinic for the nurses as a sign. It's kind of a red flag. It's a kind
yeah.
of a
Hmm.
warning signal for you to be aware of. Now you're actually not really compassionate, or now we are going down the wrong side of the road. So it's kind of a shared responsibility but the professional has the power. We have the power,
Yeah.
and we have to understand what that means.
It's very
Um,
important. It's very important because it will like predict what is gonna happen
yeah,
afterwards in terms
yeah,
of outcomes.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was thinking about the word failure and
yeah,
whose failure is it? I mean,
yeah,
actually when I was writing down the questions, I did it in purpose because it's a word that I don't like. Failure.
yeah.
I don't know. It's like we're talking about guilt. Who
Yes,
is guilt? Who
exactly.
is
Yeah,
no? Who is guilty?
yeah,
And at the end, it's not a matter of who is the guilty one.
yeah,
It's because
exactly.
we are not here to judge anyone. Wow,
So, yeah.
so
So guilt,
interesting.
and when we talk about guilt, we also talk about blaming the other person.
Blaming, yeah.
And we kind of, I've been looking into also how we construct narratives about patients, and right now in the hospital we are working with the constructions of demonizing narratives about the patient. Kind
Mm.
of. So when do we start constructing histories about patients that we don't really know? Well, very often they're not true because they are bad histories about the patient,
Yeah,
but it's also the construction of the difficult patient. So it's kind of an awareness on the power of how of language and the power in how we speak about the other person.
exactly. And at the end of the day, it's like not everyone has to be the same as me. It's like
Exactly.
we have to be
So,
ready to deal with
yeah.
different with
Ex-
with difference, let's say.
yeah. So it's
Lovely.
about respect and acknowledgement instead of yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And going directly to your country, Denmark is known to have one of the best welfare systems in the world. Yet your research highlights significant inequality for ethnic minorities. Why? I mean, why is there such a gap? It's like, I don't know, like the Nordic healthcare model designed only for those who look and speak like Scandinavian, let's say, or what's going on?
Yeah, that's also a good question, Juan. But I think that the Nordic welfare model is strong. I love it, and I love to pay my tax uh, to support the
Yeah.
Nordic welfare model. However, maybe that is also why inequality can be hard to see,
Hmm.
because the system is kind of designed to be universal, and very often universality can be hard to see, but it also very often becomes kind of one size fits all,
Yeah.
and 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 it kind of assumes that you have a high health literacy to be. You have to have strong Danish language skills, and you have to trust the institutions, and you have to know the way through the system. And I think that is actually, unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges for the ones not fitting in. So the gap is kind of created in the everyday kind of micro processes of care. Do you get my what
Yeah,
do you,
I do
yeah?
totally. Yeah.
So it's kind of when communication occurs and access, for example, to interpreters,
Yeah.
and respect for cultural misunderstandings and lack of curiosity and acknowledgement and a lot of prejudgment instead of acknowledgement. So it's kind of also structural. So it's about, well, another challenge is all the digital solutions we have. You can hardly go into a hospital without you have to go into digital programs. Even
Mm.
my husband is challenged when he goes into hospital because it's expected that he has been in their website, and you have to fill out a lot of kind of questionnaires.
Yes.
So so I wouldn't say that the model is only for those who look Danish or speak Danish, but I would say it's kind of historical, built around a majority population,
Yeah.
and the system is still catching up on the diversity of people it serves. But
It's
equity requires more than equal access. It requires opportunity to benefit from care and opportunities to get individual care
yeah.
and treatment. Yeah.
it reminds me a lot to my country healthcare system. It's also considered to be universal and free for everyone coming
Yeah,
from the taxes, but at the end,
yeah,
I mean, it's not so universal because
true.
you have to fulfill all these items. At the end, it's like an intersectional approach. It's like it's influenced for so many factors that at the end only a privileged minority is
Yeah,
the those who can uh, travel in the system without any trouble. So it's good to have it universal, but we can do it better.
yeah,
I'm
totally
sure.
agree. Yeah, totally agree.
Totally.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Dorothy, how would you advise nurses to handle situation like I don't know where families wants to take over decision making or even shielding the elderly patient from a bad diagnosis?
yeah. Well, this is one of the most ethically complex areas in
Yeah,
intercultural nursing. Well, I think we first of all have to avoid stereotypes and have to be aware that not every family wants control. And for example, not every older person wants to decide alone. But the key to explore preferences and rather than assume them is to ask the questions and be aware that we are all different. And very often I advise my colleagues to do three things. First of all, they really have to be curious and clarify patients' wishes prior, if possible, privately, without too
yeah,
many people
people.
around. So, because some people want the family to decide, but others want to decide themselves. And and it's different no matter where you come from. There are patterns we should know of, but there are always individual wishes. So it's really important to be curious on what's right for you. The second thing I very often teach and try to, because this is very often also a key for conflicts, but it's respect the family involvement while protecting patient autonomy at the same time. Um, we have conflicts because there are so many relatives coming into the hospital.
Mhm.
Instead of kind of thinking, well, it's great, we are lack of staff, the family is coming, they can support the patients, they can help us to provide a proper care. So it's really so interesting again how we constructed demonizing narratives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
true.
the third thing is actually I'm so much aware that we should remember to let the relatives be relatives. We have to use professionals interpreters for sensitive conversations. We should not kick out the relatives, but they should be there as a support for the patients. And when we use them as interpreters, they just can't cry together with the patient, or they cannot ask the critical questions for the healthcare professionals. And I experience now we do this. We really have a strong collaborations with very good interpreters. And I experience the young relatives when they come with their older relatives that they are so relieved that we have an interpreter. And we tell them they should be here, but they are not professionals. They should be relatives.
Yeah.
And I think that is also kind of, well, we have to be aware that the goal is always to create a respectful negotiation where dignity and rights and relationships are in focus. Yeah,
Totally agree. You made me think when my mother was dying.
yeah,
I remember that one of the nurses told me, Juan, you have to be a son now.
yeah,
You're not a nurse anymore. You're a son.
exactly. Yeah,
And I was like, but I mean, I cannot delete my knowledge. I cannot delete what, but, and she said, no, 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 no. You are now her
yeah,
son.
yeah,
And I was relieved. I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
oh, I can be a son. I
yeah,
was, I was,
yeah,
and that was meaningful, very
yeah,
meaningful.
yeah. And we have to really have to remember that in any case, that where we face challenges or kind of that we have to let the patients and the relatives be patients and relatives and
Mhm.
support them wherever they are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wherever the decision,
Yeah.
exactly,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was moving. You also, Dorothy, speak a lot about the power of listening and compassion as clinical tool, not just as nice to have things. For a nurse who has only 10 minutes, let's say, with a patient, and let's think about a primary care office or in a room in a hospital, with just 10 minutes with a patient and language barriers, what is the one practical way they can build trust without needing perfect fluency?
Yeah.
Which
I
is,
think that's also a wonderful question, because that's a question I very often get, because I talk about history of life and I talk about using interpreters and how can you do all this in 10 minutes. So I'm so inspired about a Norwegian professor called uh, Kai Martensen.
hmm.
And she is talking about the concept of being mindfully present
Wow.
and to hurry slowly. So no matter, so it's kind of being really sensitive, aware of your sensitivity in all encounters, and be aware of body language and eye contact. And there's a professor called Aaron something. He has made a really nice movie. He has been he has been doing research in relation and relationship and how you build up relations between people. And he did this kind of a small project where he was putting refugees together with Europeans from all over Europe. You should look for that. The movie is
Uh-huh.
called 4 Minutes of Eye Contact. And they sit across each other, all in all different kind, children, old people, two and two. They are not allowed to speak for 4 minutes. And when you look at that movie, they have to look at each other with no words.
Wow.
And within these 4 minutes, magic is happening
Uh-huh.
between these people. They don't know each other at all, and it's kind of, I use that movie for teaching to show that you can do a lot if you're aware of your body language and if you are mindfully present in the short meetings. And I very often also teach um, the nurses in anesthesia and
Hmm.
surgery, and
Yeah.
they very often only have very
Minutes.
few
Yeah.
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they can definitely be present and compassionate if they are aware. And so we have a lot of very good discussions when I teach compassionate care
Very
in
interesting.
these different settings. Yeah, and they have
It, it
a lot of good examples of
it reminds me to Jean Watson when she was talking about being present,
yes,
genuinely
yes,
present. It's
exactly, exactly.
okay, and we also talk a lot about the problems and the unequal encounters. But can you tell us a story of a time when you saw it go right? And what did a nurse or a physician do in a specific interaction that bridged the gap and made the patient feel truly safe?
Yeah, I have a very good example, and I'll try and do it short. Otherwise, you have to tell me one. But the first, I've been working for 12 and a half years in the migrant health clinic in Odense University Hospital. And my first visit to that clinic, they had just started, but there was a doctor and a nurse employed. And the nurse, she was a pediatric nurse, so she was used to talk to families and be very inclusive. And when I came to say hi to them, I was employed at that time. She welcomed me to one of her conversations, and it made such a big impression on me. She was going to talk to an Arabic speaking lady who came from Lebanon,
Mm-hmm.
and she was all dressed in a lot of black clothes. She didn't speak a word of Danish. She had been 15 years living in Denmark, and she had a lot of complaints, a lot of pain, a lot of problems. And when we looked into the patient file, we could see she had been into a lot of specialities,
Uh-huh.
trying to find out about her pain and why the reasons behind. But in all the clinics, the conclusion was We don't find anything wrong. And then they just referred her to the next clinic. So she came. It was me, the nurse, and an interpreter, and we came into this room, a small room where we were sitting, and we were going to listen to her story. And she was really complaining about pain, and she said, "Oh, I'm in pain. I'm in pain." And then my colleague said, "I know you are in pain, but first of all, I need to hear about your history, who you are, and what you have experienced. And I can see that you are coming from Lebanon. Is there anything from there you want to share with me?" And then this lady started talking. She talked for 20 minutes, no interruptions. And she told us that she had been living in Lebanon. She had experienced a lot of bombs, attacks on her house and her home. She had lost two children and she saw them being shot at.
Ooh.
And she had been fleeing together with her husband and the rest of the family, and attack and war and terrible story. She finally ends up in Denmark, and in Denmark she starts thinking that she actually thinks that she had a granite, is a splint
Yeah. Yeah.
in her neck,
Wow.
but it has never been examined. And then she talks and she tells her that she hardly sleeps at night because she is so traumatized. She thinks about her killed children, and her husband is also traumatized. So he is drinking, trying to self medication. So within 20 minutes, we had so many good reasons for why this lady was in total pain: fear, loss, grief, but also this granite in
The
her neck
neck.
had never
Yeah.
been examined. So we could say to her, "You have so many reasons for your pain, and now we'll tell the doctors and we'll start examining you. But there's a lot of reasons." And she was so happy and she was so relieved. And she came to the clinic, I think, for a year for talks and support. And her husband came in and made a lot of difference. And that conversation, I'm very often using that as an example of it made such a difference to me. I was shocked because I'd never met people, human beings so close to war. So I started crying afterwards, and I was really emotional, touched by
Yeah.
it. But the way of acknowledging the other person's history of life that actually showed that you, based on the history of life, actually got a lot of knowledge about reasons to pain, and
Mm.
which has never been questions that had never been asked her.
Asked before.
So
So
that
yeah.
was the step. Yeah, yeah,
At the end, you offer her a safe space where
exactly.
she was able to trust someone,
Yes, exactly.
and
Yeah,
with total humility, you just ask for
yeah,
information. You
yeah,
needed details.
yeah,
Wow,
exactly.
that's meaningful. That's inspiring. I
Yeah.
would say. And that's gonna be my last question. I mean, I could spend hours talking to you, but
Yeah, sorry, I've been talking too
I
much. But
I think our listeners also would value the time. So if you could teach every nursing student in Europe, let's say, just one lesson about caring for vulnerable migrants, elderly migrants, what would that lesson be?
to remember that vulnerability is embedded in all of us. And in our encounter with patients, we can increase the vulnerability if we don't meet the patient with respect and dignity. But we can also decrease it if we take care of the patient, if we listen to their history of life and to their what matters most to you,
Mm.
uh, in a compassionate way. Uh, I think that is if we kind of carry that message with us in all encounters, not only the migrants, but in anybody we
In
meet
general,
really,
yeah,
in
yeah,
general.
it's true.
Well, I think the world would be such a much better place to be in.
For sure, for sure. Okay, Dorothy, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank
Now
you, Will.
I'm looking forward to talking to you in person in Cyprus,
Oh, me too.
in the ETNA conference. I'm sure we will meet there. Since then, take care. Thank you so much for being with us in
Thank you,
this
Will.
Etna podcast. And for all our listeners, remember that Etna Talks is free. You can just go to the Etna website and click the podcast section. And if you are not a member yet of Etna, make sure you become a member. It's free. And it's also, I mean, the more the merrier, I would say. So see you in the net postcard. Bye.